All right, this is my second fork. I already did the first one. That was my first time ever doing it, so I wanted to see. It took me just under an hour to do a full fork rebuild with BBR springs and damping rods. So here we go. I'm going to do the second one, and basically really helps if you have a vise. So I got a nice little rag for my fork here. Put it in there. This is actually a pipe vise, so it's got a round dinghy here, so it doesn't bend the pipe or smash the pipe. But you don't want to do it too tight. So I'm basically just using this little hook pick that I have, little flathead screwdriver. And I also have a scribe for welding, but which is also just really pointy. And that helps too, because the hardest thing is to get out this little spring here in the top. So I'm gonna move this over here and see if I can video this. My hands are probably gonna be all up in the way, but you'll get the idea. So first you gotta remove this dust cap. Just comes right out. And then you're gonna wanna push down on this. Make sure you have enough, this is tight enough so this thing doesn't slip through the vise. Okay, then you're gonna use a small screwdriver. You're gonna push down on this cap piece here. You can get this little ring out. Which, if I had to say, this is probably the hardest part of the whole thing. So I'm actually going to use this hook one. As you guys can see, my left hand was shaking. This is probably quite a bit of pressure. But if you do it right, get a little bit of pressure on there going the other way. It just keeps wanting to go back down in there. It's kind of a pain, honestly. Trying to remember how I did it last time. Just like that. So when you push down and you get this out started just a little bit, then you relieve some pressure on this so it holds it out of place, and then you can readjust your pick. So that's that. Gonna go put this back in place over here and just lay out my pieces in order, one at a time. So starting with that bad boy. Let's see if we can get this better. Okay. Then you have your top cap, rubber side down. And you can remember there's a dimple there, so that tells you that's where you push down. Then you have this spacer, which they didn't tell me that when I got the longer springs, you no longer need the spacer. You only need this with factory springs. So this is strictly for a TTR 110. I don't know about the CRFs or the KLXs. But, okay, now we've got all that out of there. You can compress your shock, your spring. Then you can reach down in there, and there's a washer on top of your spring. So that goes next in line. And then your old spring. Take it out slowly because it's going to be covered in fork oil. So this is the oil from the first one. You're going to go ahead and dump this out. And then move your shock in and out, your fork. Just seems like a shock to me, but you know, pretty much more or less is. And get all this to drip out. So typically what I do now is I'm just gonna set this below the vise and just very gently clamp this in here to let that drip out for a minute. Just very gently. And you can also move the strut up and down as best you can. So while that's dripping, actually I'm gonna put a rag on there. I'm gonna put a rag on there. I'm telling you, it helps tremendously if you have a vise. If you don't have a vise, I mean, good luck. I've seen guys do it between your legs and all kinds of things, but it just seems like a pain in the ass to me. So now you have this little nut, Allen wrench. I don't know, I think it's like a 6 or 7 or 5 millimeter or something like that. That holds the damping rod in and the shock together. So you're just gonna break it free. If you can't break it because it's spinning, just put a screwdriver between here. Give it a little readjust. Oh God, the other one wasn't that tight. There you go. So we're just gonna crack that loose. And the reason you don't want to take it all apart like this, you can loosen it a little bit, but if you take it all the way apart, everything's going to come sliding out and splash all over your oil. So now that that's pretty much done dripping, we're going to take this out. I just lay it down like this so I don't get oil all over, and slide this thing out. Okay, the retaining nut is next. Now you can fully remove. Actually, first let's take out the damping rod. So you're going to have your damping rod, and on your damping rod there's a spring that is here. So damping rod and then spring. So spring goes in first. Okay, then you can pull your fork all the way out. And on this particular model, there is a little cone alignment thing that goes in here, so don't forget about that. Okay, and that's basically it for the disassembling of the fork. The only thing left to do is the fork seals, which once you get it apart, there's going to be more oil inside. Try and get out as best you can. Some people like to clean their forks. I don't see a reason to unless they're really dirty. I've got no corrosion. This is a 2012, but it only had a few hours on it, so it's basically brand new. Just doing this to adjust the suspension, make it better for heavier riders, and make it just a little bit taller. So, all right, so everything's apart. We're going to go ahead and remove the dust seal on the fork seal, and if you have new ones, I mean, I happen to have new ones, so if your bike's pretty new, you probably don't need to do this, but if your bike is really used, you probably want to do this. If you're going to have the forks this much apart, you might as well do it. These things are like $5. So you got the old one over there. A little bit more oil. And inside there's going to be another retaining ring, just like the first one on top, but this one's a lot easier to take out. There's no pressure on it, really. So you're just going to take that out. Put that in line, and then you're going to just pry this thing out very gently. So what I just do is I put it in here and I turn a little bit. Put it in here, turn a little bit. Put it in here, turn a little bit. You don't really want to pry too hard on this aluminum, so it's better if you just turn the screwdriver a little bit until it starts coming up, and then boom, it just comes out just like that. Okay, so inside of these there's a little spring that holds pressure on the fork, so that's going to be what's facing up. And then there is a big washer in there, which you don't really need to mess with. Let's clean this thing out. Like I said, this is really new, so it's really clean already. So curious if that thing comes up or what the deal is with that. It looks like it should go down more. Make sure you don't have metal shavings all over your shit. I just want to see if... No, that doesn't go down anymore. I don't remember it being up on the last one. Anyways, so remember, new fork seal, spring side up. So I actually just use a little bit of this fork oil that I already had here on my table. Some guys take a big giant socket like this that fits over the whole thing and kind of tap it down in there. But on the first one, I didn't have to do that. I just kind of worked it around with my thumb until I got below the line for the ring. Okay. Once it's down there far enough, go ahead and put your retention ring back in there. And you're going to go ahead and put your new fork dust seal on. And this one I did tap with the socket just to make sure it's all the way in there. Okay, that's it for the fork seals. Pretty straightforward. Yeah, just this is the first time I've ever worked on a motorcycle. I've only had this dirt bike for like 3 weeks now, and I just did a whole bunch of shit on it. So here we are. Oh shit, see, I already fucked up. I forgot this big washer. So what happens when I'm talking to the camera. Unfortunately, I have to pull everything back out, which is not ideal for a brand new fork seal, but that's okay. I'm just gonna gently okay, do not forget your big washer. I honestly thought these would be a lot tighter to fit in there, but they're really not that hard to push down in there at all. Okay, retention ring goes back in. Make sure your ring is fully seated into the groove so it doesn't let that fork seal come out. Okay, then dust cap. This slips right on because it's all oily. And now we reassemble. We're going to start with our new BBR damping rod. Is this BBR? Yeah. So as you guys can see, it is about 1.5 inches taller. That's what's going to give you the height. So first, your spring, actually let's do this. That ain't right. Okay, so you're gonna put your shock or your fork back in. So you need to make sure you put this in the right direction. Then you're going to face this up so it doesn't fall down. And you're just going to gently slide your fork all the way down to the bottom. And as you can see there, it's nice and lined up. Okay. Then we're going to put in our buffer spring, I'll call it, gun terms, and the new dampening rod. And the dampening rod will go into place. You just might have to shake it around. And once it's there, we'll go ahead and put the screw in that holds it. I forget what you call it. It's just the lower fork screw bolt. I'll just do it finger tight right now, so I'll get to that in a second. But now just make sure everything feels right. And you keep in mind your spring will be in there bouncing around, because when it's all the way out, it doesn't do that. So it's to stop it from opening up all the way. So then I'll go ahead and put my screwdriver in here and crank this thing down to 15 or 20 pounds. Not too much. You don't need to go crazy. That might have been too much, but as you can see, it's holding air good. So now this is the fun part. This is when you want to add your oil. And to add the oil, you need the fork to be fully compressed. So I'm gonna go ahead and chalk it up in the vise on the fork stem, because I do not want this to be all the way down. And so what I did for this is, it calls out for 92 millimeters of fork oil. So I used my mic and I measured it, my micrometer, or you can Google it and use a tape measure. But I put a little line there on how far it's supposed to be, how much oil is supposed to be in there. So basically, from the very top of your thing down is where the oil is supposed to be. So it's supposed to be about right there. So what I do is I just pour some in. And I have a little inspection flashlight. Just gonna pour in. I'd say it's about a cup worth, maybe a little bit more. Maybe a cup and a half. But it's gonna drain down in there and fill up the fork, so you can help it out a little bit. And every time it goes up and down, it just keeps filling up. So wait until it stops bubbling, and we're gonna give it a little bit more, and be careful because it fills up fast. So just do a little bit and then check. A little bit and then check. Because last time I put too much in and I had to siphon it out with a straw, one finger length at a time. So now if you're really tricked, you can, yeah, this is impossible. You gotta have, so I need about another ½ inch in there, which is not very much. So I'm just gonna put a little splash and keep checking. Need a little bit more. I don't really know what happens if you have too much fork oil. Obviously it'll probably leak, it might blow your forks out. Like I said, I'm not a motorcycle guy. This is my first one, so. And when you do this, you do not have the spring in. Okay, so now the oil's touching right on my mark. Then we are going to put in the spring, the washer for the spring. Which goes down there. Hopefully it stands up straight. You'll be able to tell because you'll put the new spring in is much longer. The new spring is actually the size of the old spring and the spacer. So this video is brought to you by Corona, so always drink and work on your bike. Just kidding. Drink responsibly. Get rid of the old fork seals, old dampening rod, old spring, old spacer. Don't need those. Okay, now what you're gonna do, you're gonna adjust this. Take it out, do not spill it. Get rid of this thing out of the way. You're gonna fully open your fork all the way. Max it out as far as it will go. Then we are going to clamp it into the vise. This is probably the hardest part. Get it clamped into your vise. And again, make sure you're using a round pipe vise. That is suggested. But you want to be able to push down on this pretty hard and see how it slipped. It just might go a little bit tighter. We're going to put our spring in there. Make sure the washer feels flat. It should be about a ½ inch or so out. That's normal. And then we're gonna have the hardest part. So we have our retention ring and our cap. See how that thing's about 1 inch out now? We have to push that down in there and put the ring on at the same time. So make sure there's no dust or anything on here. Okay, you want the seal side down. Then I would do a test run. I would push down on it and make sure it doesn't slip out of the vise, because it will do that. Then you need a little screwdriver. See, it's hard. This is almost a 2-person part, but I was able to get it last time. Got to keep it down. I don't know why this thing's not popping out. It's recommended to have 2 people for this part. And dry hands. Whew. Sure, that was not really easy to see for you guys, but show you what it looks like close up. Because a lot of the videos I've seen, they don't really show this part. So that's what it looks like. And that's what it looks like when you push down. It only goes down about 1/4 of an inch, if that. So now it's fully compressed, locked in. Put your little dust cap back on. Check for any marks, which as you guys can see, it's perfectly straight, no scratches or nothing. So that's it. That's all I got. Reassemble it back on the bike. It's just 2 bolts. Put the tire back on and the brake back on, and you're on your way. And don't forget to get an extended brake cable. You need like 2 more inches of brake cable. So mine, unfortunately, is in the mail, and it won't be here for a day or 2. So we're just gonna see how it works right now. Thankfully, I don't need to ride it today. So yeah, thanks for watching.